Broadcasting from the commodity capital of the world, Zurich, Switzerland, this is Insider's Guide to Energy.
Welcome to Insider's Guide to Energy. I'm the host, Chris Sass, and today with me is John Berger, Chairman and CEO of Sunnova. John, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to have you here. We've been working on our EV mini-series. We've been doing quite a bunch of work in North America, and Sunnova's name has come up a number of times. So maybe it makes sense to start by, who is Sunnova?
Well, Sunnova is a energy as a service provider, and we're essentially building a adaptive energy network that's global in nature to deliver a better energy service at a better price. So we're out mostly in the residential market, but also in businesses, and working with our dealers to go out and we acquire the best equipment out there, whether it's solar panels or batteries or inverters or EV chargers, load managers, generators, everything, including some on the demand side of things like heat pumps, air conditioning, high efficiency air conditioning. And we're installing those, we finance them, and we service them out of our global operations center here in Houston. And that means rolling trucks and getting things fixed within, our goals within 24 hours of a problem, so they can be up and running and be your power provider that you can depend on.
You mentioned a lot of elements of almost like a microgrid or a bit being placed. Now, are these happening at the consumer level, at the homes? Are you coming in and putting batteries, solar, charging all the elements, heat pump into someone's home as a service then?
Absolutely. And you can choose any which way you want to finance. If you want to lease a power purchase agreement where you pay by the kilowatt hour. If you want a loan, we can do that as well. If you want to pay cash, you can do that as well. Any which way you want to do it. And if you already have a system, we'll even sell you the service, which is a booming part of our business, which is just to do the service only. And people pay by the month. They pay for the fix, whatever they want to pay. But there's, as you add more and more equipment to your power system, you're going to have more and more things go wrong. It's just the way it's the law of numbers. And more people are dependent on us, even when the grid is not there and the utility is not there. And that's happening with an increasing amount of frequency. We've got the storms bearing down on the U.S. Yet again, we've had massive heat waves, including here in Houston. And it's really stressed a lot of these utilities out, not to mention all the wildfire issues, which unfortunately we saw in Hawaii with the Maui catastrophe. And we've seen this before in California multiple times, and it's spreading. So a lot more people are deciding to take matters in their own hands, call Sunnova, and get the power that they can depend on.
Now, changing power supplier, I imagine, is a function of cost. So is there regions where this makes sense? Because cost of electricity isn't the same everywhere, and you have different regions and providers. Where is this making sense, and where is it getting the early growth the greatest?
Well, we're now in, almost. We're in all the U.S. territories except American Samoa and have customers. And we're almost in all 50 states, and we're in the District of Columbia. So we anticipate by next year we'll be in all 55 U.S. states, territories in the District of Columbia. And no one else can match that. We've also publicly disclosed that we're moving into Europe as well. So we see ourselves as a global power provider and energy company. And if you look at where we see the most demand, it is in areas that are most impacted by climate change and have the highest utility rates. Some people think that utility rates are going to drop next year, just with the dropping of the price of natural gas and coal, and a little bit on the oil side. We're not seeing that. In fact, we're seeing a lot of utilities go in for rate increases. It's perplexing, but some people seem to have forgotten that one of the biggest cost inputs is interest rates to utilities, and interest rates are sky high, as we all know. And they also have a lot of overhead cost waste that they're spending money on. So it's a cost that Americans and indeed everybody in the world, but certainly Americans, have seen utilities jack up rates at historic levels, and they've been doing so for year in, year out. We see that continuing. So increasingly, we see that we're viable with all of our solutions on the energy services side in every part in every town of the United States.
So, more generally, just in the market, I've talked to a number of folks that say a lot of folks just have solar. You mentioned kind of a clustering effect of other technologies to help drive that. What's the take rate of adding battery or changing to a modern heat pump or something? What are you seeing? Because I was under this understanding that a lot of the initial deployments, solar didn't have battery in a lot of cases, especially in the consumer side.
That's correct. The battery is relatively new. We were one of the first, actually, probably the first out of the gate of the major service providers with storage, in particular in Puerto Rico after the devastating Hurricane Maria impact. And we now, since 2017, have sold nothing but 100% attachment rate of storage, which means that 100% of our customers we sold had storage. We also went back to our existing customer base and still do, and try to get storage upgraded there with those customers as well. Right now, we're running at about 30% of attachment rate of all sales. We reported that in our last quarterly earnings. We do see that expanding. We're seeing a materially higher storage rate, for instance, in California. We're seeing a lot of interest in storage in Texas. With the hurricanes, we anticipate even more storage interest in Florida. And so it's really spreading. And when you start to see some pretty significant price declines in storage, which we predicted over a year ago, they have started to materialize. I think that people are going to be quite shocked about how far the pricing of storage is going to drop over here in the next coming weeks and months. We anticipate that as the price drops, that will open up more consumers to getting storage as a part of their energy service with us as well.
Now, when you're buying energy as a service, you're installing and owning the gear. So does that mean that you're also selling power back into the grid, and the consumer doesn't play in that game at all, but their advantage is maybe a lower price for energy or better service of energy? And is that how that works?
Yes, it's early days, but when I spoke about that, we see Sunnova as an adaptive energy company. So building out a network that you can essentially use to not only serve it yourself, but to take any excess you may have. For instance, you may not be at the house during the day, like yesterday when Houston was breaking record temperatures. When you look at that excess power, that can be sold back into the wholesale market. It essentially goes to your neighbors. You should benefit from to some degree from that, and without having a being a part of a adaptive energy network, it's impossible for you to get the best energy service at the best price. So that could come in terms of additional economics. It could come to you in the form of payments. It could be coming into in the form of bill credits. It could come in form of upfront savings over other products and other competitors that are not able to offer the benefits that Sunnova is able to offer. For instance, we offer service, essentially bumper to bumper, if you will, on loans. No one else does that in the United States, and that is a part of the service that you get with us. That's in part paid for by the aggregation capability that we're able to generate additional revenues in the wholesale marketplace. So there's a myriad of ways to benefit, but the consumer does benefit in a great deal. And I predict that the consumer will continue to expand those benefits as we move forward in time, and regulators open their minds and their eyes to what the consumers need and want and what they're capable of. I think we're going to have a lot more financial benefit go back to the people where it belongs.
So This conversation is a little bit different nomenclature than perhaps I would think of in a utility kind of conversation where I would say ratepayer. You're calling them a consumer, so there's some difference there. Maybe we should step back and talk a little bit about how utilities worked in the past and where this is transformative, because I think we had different relationships with our utility, at least in North America, um, than what we're looking to do forward, or the model you're proposing seems to be different than what it's been.
Yes, I think that if you go back and you look at where we opened up a number of industries, say 30, 40 years ago, starting in the late 70s with the President Jimmy Carter and then continued under Reagan, there was a lot of benefit to opening up natural gas, for instance, to open markets, telecommunications, airlines, et cetera. And when you look at the energy industry, and particularly the U.S. power industry, we're just a little bit too early because there was no technological shift. Unlike in telecommunications, you had the cell phone, you had the internet, you had IP telephony, right? We didn't have that in the 90s, so we got a little ahead of ourselves. But now we have all of this new technology, and we're behind on the regulatory side. So I'll give you an example. Australia, Japan, continental Europe, the United Kingdom, a lot of these countries have a more free and open market and consumer friendly market than the United States, which is shocking to a number of people, even in the energy business. But what we need to do is we need to free up the utility, break them up. We need to have the poles and wires be a separate entity. We need to have the consumers and generation be separated from the poles and wires. Those poles and wires entities need to be able to have the cost savings. Some of the cost savings go to their shareholders. Right now, you can't. So there's no incentive to not spend less money. I mean, how crazy is that? Utilities literally have an incentive to spend more of our money, and they do it, and they do well. I mean, if you and I could become billionaires by the end of this podcast, if we had the same model, we could spend all this money and collect 10, 12% on top of everybody's money that we spent. I mean, that's a great model, right? That's literally the model that they have. And it worked for a little while, maybe, but it certainly doesn't work now. With the ability to put generation and then manage the load differently with new technology, solid state devices, think semiconductors, software. This is the only industry left that's just archaic. It's stuck in the industrial age, and we don't have a voice in it. We have 5 people or so that's at a public utility commission, and guess what? All commissions, except that Colorado banded this recently, and more states are looking at it. But this is unbelievable. The public utility commissioners can go on boondoggles and go to nice restaurants and have expensive bottles of wine, and then jobs are given to them afterwards by the utility. And that's legal in most states. That's crazy. That's not legal anywhere else. So you can imagine the amount of graft and corruption and revolving door and spending of ratepayers' money that's been going on. And you've seen a lot more of the media and the press really start to showcase this. I mean, look at the just the absolute failures of PG&E and Hawaiian Electric and all these on these wildfires. There's a massive amount of scandal that's going on in the electric utility industry, and what people are looking for is a choice. And why shouldn't they have it? They should be able to compete. If Sunnova doesn't do a good job, they should be able to fire me and go to somebody else. They should be able to drive a better bargain and get a better energy service at a better price. And in the United States, away from all these other countries, Australia, Europe, we don't have that opportunity. We should have that opportunity.
So when someone's buying energy as a service, are you providing baseload and all the load, or is this kind of at peak times? Because I assume that when the sun's not out, or let's say there's a hurricane going on today or hitting land tomorrow, and let's say the power's out for a number of days and they don't have battery for that many days. They haven't, you can only put so much battery in. Let's say it's out for a week and they only have a couple days of battery. Where's the base load coming from? Is that coming from the utility that we're now kind of bashing a little bit? Are you expecting that they will, and I'm produce?
Yeah.
Is there going to be a generation plant somewhere that's doing that?
Well, there is. And what we see is the power system looks more like the internet, which is you have some centralized assets as opposed to 100% centralized assets, and you have some decentralized assets. So that combination of centralized and decentralized is something that we think that is where the future of the energy business is going. But if you look at, for instance, in Houston and Dallas, you can go get competitive rates on centralized generation. Natural gas fired centralized generation or solar farms, wind farms are a big part of it, of course, in Texas. And so it doesn't mean, and that goes back to my point, break the utility up, break the monopoly up, and let that generation be competed by the consumer. But increasingly, your battery can base load. I mean, it does on my two homes here, and you're looking for a dwindling amount of power that you need, even in a high load factor market like Houston, because the technology of solar and batteries and managing load is getting better and better and better. So we have a technological shift it's underway, and it's expanding. But at the same time, what I'm saying is let the centralized generation and decentralized generation be rolled up under one company like Sunnova with competitors, and let the consumer be able to choose what they want, negotiate the pricing, negotiate the level of reliability that they want on their home or business, but to make it serve the consumer better.
You mentioned in an earlier part of your answer, you gave the analogy of the internet and technology there, and I was a part of that, and as a technologist, and in the early days, if you were in a rural community, there wasn't there wasn't the drive to go run. If your house was a mile apart, you weren't getting high speed internet in your house because you were in rural America. And so you were a late comer to that. There were some federal programs later to bring low income communities internet speed. How does that equate to what we're seeing now? So my experience has been the folks that can afford to have solar panels, battery packs tend to be upper middle class folks that can, hedge and do that and get the better rates. How's this working for the average person or below average income home?
Well, that's a great point. And if you look at one of the subsidies, and it's a massive subsidy that the monopolies have, is a credit wrap by each and every state. Yes, including you, Texas. You socialize losses. So when somebody, one of your neighbors, doesn't pay, and by the way, there's plenty of people who make a lot of money that can't pay their bills. Trust me. And there's a lot of people that don't make a lot of money, and they're our customers, and they pay the bills. So what we're really talking about is not necessarily there is a overlap, a Venn diagram of low income and poor credit quality, to be sure, but it's really poor credit quality. I'm going to stress that because a lot of our customers, as I said, are really more middle class, in some cases a little bit on the lower end of the middle class income range. What we can do is we can extend that credit wrap that the state gives the monopoly on their side of the meter to the behind the meter. And how would this work? Well, a number of states have worked on this and have had some small programs. Hawaii is one of those states, but we also can do that through the federal government. And indeed, through our Department of Energy Loan Program Office loan, that's exactly what we're going to receive from the government is 90% guarantee by the federal government on our loans. And then we're going to use that, and we already have started, to expand into a lower credit quality spectrum. Not a whole lot, but some. And that some is really widening out our ability to go out and capture more consumers that have lower credit quality. We need to ramp that up across the industry. And I think that's something that would easily address the concerns that I think are legitimate of making sure that no one's left behind.
Right. And then I don't think any conversation in North America about energy can miss the IRA. How is the IRA impacting the segment of the business you're in?
Well, it's had a large impact. I think first and foremost, let's look at the equipment manufacturers. There's been a lot of announcements of new manufacturing plants for inverters, for all parts of the solar panel or module, for batteries, and there'll be others for EV charger construction, manufacturing rather, a bunch of different technologies. And that's important that we have those jobs here, that we have the capability of making that equipment here. But it's also a part of a global manufacturing base that's expanding quite rapidly all over the world. And so the availability of equipment is going up. The price of that equipment is going down, commensurate with the dramatic increase in manufacturing volumes. And so that's good for consumers, right? Prices going down is great. It's great. It is good for Sunnova too. And when you look at what incentives that Sunnova customers get and what part of the incentives that we manage, it's really in the investment tax credits with additional adders for domestic manufacturing. So there's a twice benefit, if you will, from manufacturing in the United States, and that was intentional on the government's part. And then there's also adders for low-income communities, which addresses some of the issue in the previous question. Also, there's adders for what they call energy communities. So communities that are historically probably a little more economically challenged next to coal plants, coal mines, oil refineries, some of those areas across the United States, some of which exist here in Houston. So there's a number of incentives to drive adoption faster of cleaner power. And the IRA has further expanded and actually given a lot more monies to my oil and gas friends for carbon sequestration, hydrogen. So there's a lot more monies around that, those technologies than even solar and wind. And so I think it's a moment in time where we finally have an energy policy. We're finally doing what's necessary to address the issue of climate change. The impact, I think we can all see, is getting worse and worse with regards to climate change, and we need to do something to address that. And gets the energy industry, and this is an important point that I think a lot of people miss. We have to get the energy industry into becoming consumer friendly, a capitalism industry that embraces technological change, embraces service change, and really gets us to an energy industry of the 21st century instead of one of the 19th century or 20th century.
And then, so we talked about policy. You said we now have some policy there. You're talking future we need to do. Where are we in the journey from your perspective? In North America, for example, I know you're global, but let's talk about North America for a moment here. How are we doing in the race here?
Well, I think we're doing well. I think there's certain challenges. A lot of people point to skyrocketing interest rates, for instance, but then I point back and look at the utilities. They have the same negative impact of those skyrocketing rates. It's mitigated. It's that hit is taken over time, but still it's there. So there's a lot of I think some consternation about the growth of the industry right now, but we're seeing really dramatic growth and strong growth. I think it's really more about the business models. The industry is shifting away from just putting solar panels on your roof and trying to figure out how to pay for it to something that's more encompassing of a service and being a part of a network so that you can benefit from the ability to sell power back into the wholesale system. And you can only do that through a service provider like Sunnova. So some of that shift, if you will, has caught some people a little bit off guard and said, well, maybe we're not having the kind of growth or tailwinds that we expected of the IRA. I dispute that looking at what Sunnova is accomplishing right now and what we continue to expect to accomplish. And so I'm quite optimistic. I see a lot of growth. I look at the growth of the industry, and I look and feel like what we should have orders of magnitude more growth, and I think that will happen as more and more consumers find themselves at their house almost naked, if you will, and we should have solar and storage and energy service from Sunnova. I think it will become more commonplace. It'll become more natural. The adoption curve is always an S curve, and I see we're at that bottom end, inflecting higher. So I'm quite optimistic that we're going to see this through, and we're going to make the change to a new energy industry, I think, faster than a lot of critics think.
Do you believe the electrification of everything will cause infrastructure problems you see right now? I turn on my light switch, and generally my lights come on. My computer generally stays on unless there's a weather event or something more unlikely happening. I don't see brownouts unless it's 109 degrees in Texas or something like that. Do you see that becoming a reality for more Americans in the current infrastructure as we make this transition? And you think that will drive the desire to have more independence? Because I mean, I hear theories that could come, but you and your role and your visibility point, is that on the horizon for most Americans?
It is, and I want to set the record straight and the facts. I've run a utility from the control room years ago. Unfortunately, it was a lot of years ago. I'm getting up there in age, but and I've been around physical trading of power wholesale across the United States, even into Mexico. I've handled a lot of physical generation in my life as well, so I understand the physical system. And what I will tell you is that a lot of the risk in the physical system as it is today is in the poles and wires. Look at what's thought to have caused the Maui fires, for instance, was the wires. What did cause a lot of the wildfires in California was the wires. When a hurricane comes through, what causes most of the damage? Lack of service and drop of service. It's the wires going down. So when you look at as an engineer, which I am, in theory, every foot of line is a failure point. So it's a failure prone system. That shouldn't shock us because again, this is an industrial age system, not a digital age system. And so when you look at the fossil generation, those big coal plants, trust me, and those gas plants, they trip offline like that, very quickly. And when you look at Winter Storm Uri in Texas, the wellheads of the gas pipelines froze off. The power plants that were powered by gas tripped off. Even the nuke tripped off. So when you look at a lot of the reality, step away from the sound bites and story concoction, the renewable energy, in particular solar and storage, is actually quite reliable. And when you look at this last heat wave, which is measured in weeks, and a little bit in months in Texas, solar and storage has really come to the rescue here. So let's not demonize any of these fuel sources. Do we still need some centralized gas for a while in Texas and other areas? Absolutely, we do. That's a reality. But again, we can have technology come in instead of having centralized generation of whatever it is, a solar farm or a gas plant, combined cycle gas plant with a wire coming into your house, a single wire. Why not have that plus solar storage managing load from Sunnova on your house? Now you really got things set up. And how would that work with the network? Well, now you're charging up cars and trucks all over the network and it's moving all over the place. We haven't had to deal with that. What's the best way to supply power to your house to charge your car? Putting solar and storage and managing the loads. The utilities know this. If they don't make the money off of it, so they don't want it, but they know this is the most economic way of addressing the increased demand for electricity driven by electrification of the home and of the transportation that you use in your daily lives. So this combination coming together of this new distributed technologies that are solid state, software enabled, and this old technology, I think is going to give us a more robust system, not a less robust system. But the regulators got to make the right decisions, figure out that technology's moved ahead, consumers have moved ahead, and do their job in integrating and giving consumers choice.
And then you mentioned homes quite a bit. There's a number of folks that live in multi-tenant buildings. How does Sunnova, or how do you see that playing in this architecture going forward?
We're not in that part of the market yet, but there's community solar when you can group together small and sometimes large, but solar, farms, if you will, or plants. Increasingly, you're coupling that with storage. It used to be, I would say, a year ago that was not so common. Now it's becoming very common. And then you're starting to think about, well, what about EV chargers there? And then how do you manage the other side, the load, if you will, with load management? So we're increasingly looking at that market, but that is the way if you lived in an apartment that you would sign up essentially for Sunnova service, and we would be able to meter out the power to you from some more, quote, centralized plants, kind of small centralized. And again, this is the way the new energy system is going to work. It's going to have the ability to network and fill in the interior in a major city like Houston with solar technology and storage technology, where you can't do that right now with large scale gas fired plants, for instance. It's going to be able to fill in that inner part of the city and give you a better energy service at a better price.
And the other thing that kind of, as you're talking about this, um, so you talked about financing of the assets sitting on site. Um, I also assume that you're one of the models you had mentioned earlier is you can not own them, that Sunnova could own them and manage them for you. Does that impact in the real estate sale? So with the private homes where people are moving and things like that, does it complicate selling homes, or how does that work? I've got a battery system and it's got half the life used up or whatever by the time I sell my home, and it's owned by a third party. How does that all work for an average sales home or home sale? Sorry.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of sales of homes happening right now, right? With the mortgage rates so high. But what I would say is that we do thousands and thousands of transfers every year. We see that increasing. We're making that easier and easier. We're automating a lot of the transfer. We now have a service that goes out as soon as you put your house up for sale. We know it, and we look up the agent and say, "Hey, just so you know, there's a service contract here with us that needs to be transferred. These are the documents you need to fill out, just like you have to do in any other part of a home sale or home purchase. And this makes it easy for you." So we're here to make it easy. We're enabling technology, and who knows, there's probably some AI that we're going to be able to put in place to really speed up that transfer. But we can transfer whether it's a lease or a PPA or a loan. We do those as well. So you can quote legally own the system and you can get the tax credit, but it's our service that's a part of that loan contract, and we can transfer the loan if you need to the buyer and facilitate that home sale.
We talked a little bit about the history, but it might be helpful for myself and for the audience to understand a little bit about the technology and the transformation taking place around us. Maybe describe historically where we are and kind of where we are today or where we're headed.
Certainly. So if you go back, say 15 years ago, panels were and maybe a little bit longer than that. Panels were like $6, $7 a watt. They were kind of a science project, very low powered. They were not mass, produced. And as we move forward in time, especially the Chinese came in and really ramped up production, dramatically dropped over 95% price reduction in solar modules. The energy density kept going up, roughly about 10 watts for every, call it 18 months or so. So kind of a Moore's law type thing. And then we hit a point where we took string inverters, and then we said, well, we could do some optimization of those inverters, and we could put some inverters even on the panels called microinverters. But at the end of the day, it was still a solar panel that was essentially generating as the sun was out and essentially swinging off the utility system as a service. Now, what we have, and it started about in 2017 with Maria hitting Puerto Rico in that devastating storm, we really started to see home storage or batteries really step up and get a lot more powerful, pardon the pun, and a lot cheaper. And so that changed the game completely. Now you can store that energy that's produced during the day when you may not need it, and put it back to use at night where you do need it, for instance, at your home. And then that same storage technology enabled cheaper and cheaper and cooler cars to come about. So now your home's the gas station, and you start to fill up on that solar power, whether it's during the day, which would be more optimal energy efficiency wise, or during at night. And now we're starting to see load management. How do you more intelligently manage that load through hardware and software so that you can essentially squeeze more juice out of your batteries, if you will. So a lot of the technology is starting to really inflect higher in terms of the number of options out there for both supply and the demand side of things. And those technologies are inflecting higher as they're exponentially getting better, and certainly exponentially right now this year getting cheaper. So we see all this coming together, and it's not just solar panels anymore, but it's a system. It's a power system, not unlike the utility system. It's not just one type of fuel, one type of generator technology, or one type of wire. It's a whole system that comes together that's enabled you to flip the switch and have the power come on. We see the same thing happening on your home or your business.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. One thing that comes to mind, just a quick follow up, is when I buy an iPhone and I buy one today, there's always going to be a 15, 16, 17 or new iPhone coming out. Um, what do you do to protect as a homeowner? So if I buy a system today, and you just described an ecosystem coming together with great parts, and through earlier part of the interview, we talked about heat pumps and other kind of things that cluster around this kind of technology. How am I protected in the future? Because if I do a PPA or some sort of long-term agreement to pay for this, because there's infrastructure, there's real costs, how do I secure low prices and secure that I'm able to be flexible into the next generation of ecosystem that's being built today?
Sign up with a service provider. I'll give you a great example. When we all moved away from 2G and 3G to 5G over the last couple of years or so, we went out and replaced all the meters on our customers' homes for free if you had a service agreement. So there is some technological risk if you're not signed up with a service provider like us or one of our competitors. But what I would also say is that the panels, they may be outdated, the batteries may be outdated, but they still produce a power, and they still store power. And so there's some viability there. It may not give you everything that you want. Let's say, for instance, your in-laws moved in. Sorry, bad news. The in-laws moved in, take up a bedroom. The demand goes up, and then you buy 2 electric vehicles. Well, that's a lot of load that just suddenly appeared right at this house. And what you would do, and we started to see a little bit of this, is you would either get a second contract or system so that you have more roof space. And remember, the panels are more energy dense, basically, and you get more batteries. Or we could come in and we could take those old panels off. We could down market them, give them to either charity or sell them off to somebody else who that works just fine for them, especially at a lower price, and get you a whole new system, and then take the contract and just blend it out. So again, I think increasingly people need to make sure that they're not in this by themselves because of those risks, that they do have a company that's responsible and giving them the energy service that they deserve and want.
So the takeaway that I've had from our interview so far, and as we come through it, is that the technology is kind of there. It's the commercial problem that is being solved. Is a lot of what we've talked about comes back to that there's tech there. It may be getting refined. We may be pulling it together. There's some regulation that sounded like it needs to change, or the utility structure may want to change. But a lot of it comes down to the business plan and the economics to make these things work. Is that a safe takeaway from what we've said so far?
It is. I would say that if you had some extreme critic on, he or she would say, well, you need to have some price decreases in batteries, for instance, in particular. Agreed. You do. Are we seeing that now? Absolutely. So I think part of this is also we need to see the equipment costs come down. But part of that regulatory change is on the permitting side and interconnection. The utilities don't want to have the interconnection, and so they want to drag it out. They want to charge a lot for it. They want to get in the way. Basically, it's anti-competitive behavior. So we need to have the politicians and the regulators do their job and get the utility to behave and say, okay, allow interconnection. So that drops the soft costs, what they call, out of the bottom. And the U.S., unfortunately, globally, is a leader in soft costs, which is not a good thing.
Interconnection we've talked about a number of times on the show, and when you said you were in almost all territories of the U.S. except for one, that was a little bit surprising to me, because I've heard 12 months longer in some locations to get an interconnect taken care of, and so that does make it less attractive, and you have to be fairly patient to get those things to be able to do that if you're going to sell your power back into the grid. So different models, but all right. Well,
That's correct. Thank you.
And then going forward, do you envision energy then truly being commoditized where I could buy my energy from a Google and Amazon, a Sunnova, whatever, the electrons will come in my house from whoever I buy? Is that the model you're proposing, and it's just based on price performance? Or where do we go, turn the clock ahead 10, 15 years? Is that what you think will be like? I just buy my energy from whoever has the deal I want?
That is what made America America. The empowerment of the individual. The one, you get to vote, you get to choose what you want to do with your life, you get to choose who you do business with. That is America. Why can't we have it here in the energy business? If we want to take our cars that we now fill up and have our choice of gas stations, whether it's an Exxon, a Chevron, a Shell, or whatever, and we want to put those at our house, are we signing up to only have one provider who tells us through their means of however they've coerced the local public utility commission exactly what we're going to pay, when we're going to pay it, what we're going to get in terms of reliability or not get, would be a better way of phrasing it, and not get access to new technologies and new services? Is that the country we want to live in? I don't think so. There's a better way, and it's called the American way. We got to catch up to the rest of the world, but absolutely that is the way that it should be, and I think we'll absolutely go in that direction. Consumer choice is going to dominate the U.S. power industry.
As we pull this together and kind of get towards a close of this conversation, what hurdles are still out there that would be easy to remove, or that we should be looking to get removed? What gates this from happening? What should the listeners, and listeners in this show range from senior leaders in the energy industry to folks just interested in energy. What should they be looking to change or push to get changed to make this happen and make that vision possible?
Give the people freedom to choose. Trust the people.
Give the people freedom in what way? They need to disband the way the utilities are. I mean, right, when I move into my house, or when I go to my house, I call the local utility today, and the local utility says, okay, great. They do a credit check. Fine. You need a deposit. You don't need a deposit. Here you go. Here's your electricity, right? That's how it's worked for me in the past, right? So how do I change that model? Because the wires coming in come from my local utility. So how do I make that change?
Same way you sign up for a new cell phone. You got choices out there. You can go to Verizon, AT&T, and other providers, right? And you should be able to go out there and market and say, hey, you work from home. You need to have a high level of reliability, demand for power, and connectivity, right? You should be able to say, hey, I don't want to ever go down. What's that cost me? Or you work in an office and you're like, hey, I don't have any kids. I'm not really home that much. I don't really care if the power goes off that much. Okay, well, you can pay a lower rate and have a lower level of reliability. You get to choose what you want. That's what should happen. You should be able to go in, move into your new house, and call Sunnova and call our competitors, and you go get the deal that you deserve. And to your point, you can't do that today. You should be able to.
All right. Well, as we close this up, any final thoughts to bring our conversation together for our audience?
I think we're closer than ever to having the energy industry that we all want. We want it to be more affordable, we want it to be more reliable, and we want it to be cleaner. And what we have to do is get the incumbents, the monopolies out of the way, give people the freedom to choose, and so that we can put together a system and a service for each of these homeowners and consumers and businesses that fits their bill, that fits what their life is, that they want to lead, that their level of how they want to participate in making climate change a thing of the past, and addressing what increasingly may be are the existential threat of our lifetimes and our kids' lifetimes. So we want to give the people the power to choose. We want to be powering energy independence. And at the end of the day, we know and are confident that if we give the people the power to choose, that they will choose wisely and will move ahead and have a better energy system and deliver a better energy service at a better price.
Well, John, I want to thank you so much for being a guest on our podcast today. Interesting hearing a lot about what Sunnova is doing and your vision for Sunnova. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For our audience, we hope you've enjoyed this content. If you did, don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to leave comments underneath the show on YouTube, LinkedIn, wherever you get your show. And we'll see you again next time on Insider's Guide to Energy.